Welcome back to The Climate Layer. I'm Alex Bonat. Last week we talked about electric vehicles, about my personal journey from skeptical to convinced, about doing the research, understanding the economics, and making a choice that felt right. Today, I want to zoom out because EVs are one piece of a much bigger transformation that is happening right now. Not someday, not in some distant future, but right now. Bloomberg recently reported that battery storage costs hit record lows in 2025, down 67% in just 3 years. While federal climate policy in the US moves backward, technology economics actually keep moving forward, and the economics of clean energy are becoming too good to ignore. After episode 5 and 6, where we talked about 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries crossed and what are we doing to the ocean, I want to show you what is working. Not lab experiments, not even pilot projects, commercial scale deployments. Technologies that are scaling whether politicians pay attention or not. Because here's the thing, innovation doesn't stop because Washington looks the other way. Engineers keep engineering, entrepreneurs keep building, and the global energy transition keeps moving. Let's talk about the innovators building the future right now. I want to start with something that doesn't get nearly enough attention: battery storage. You've probably heard about batteries in the context of EVs. Lithium-ion batteries powering Teslas and Rivians, BYDs, Fords, and all the rest. But what is happening in stationary energy storage? Batteries sitting at solar farms and wind farms and on the grid. This is arguably even more important. Here are the numbers. Battery storage costs are now $117 per kilowatt hour. 3 years ago, they were over $350. That is a 67% drop in 3 years. And in 6 major markets around the world, 4-hour battery storage systems now cost less than $100 per megawatt hour to operate. That is competitive with natural gas peaker plants. That's a game changer. So why does this matter? Because solar and wind are intermittent. The sun doesn't always shine. The wind doesn't always blow. For decades, that intermittency has been the main argument against renewable energy. You can't run a grid on unreliable power. You need baseload, always-on generation like coal or natural gas or nuclear. Battery storage changes that equation entirely. Charge the batteries when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. Discharge them when demand is high and renewables are not generating. Suddenly, solar plus storage can provide the same reliability as a fossil fuel plant. And in many markets, it's now cheaper. So what's driving these cost reductions? And there are a few things. First, overcapacity in EV battery manufacturing. Companies built massive factories expecting EV demand to skyrocket. Demand did grow, but not as fast as manufacturing capacity. That oversupply is actually pushing prices down. Second, better system designs. Engineers keep figuring out how to get more performance out of the same materials. Longer lifespans, faster charging, better efficiency. Third, scale and learning curves. The more batteries we make, the cheaper they get. This isn't magical, this is economics. Volume drives down costs. And fourth, competition, especially from China, which dominates battery manufacturing and is pushing costs down aggressively. Now, most of the batteries being deployed today are lithium ion. Same chemistry as your laptop or your phone or an EV. But there is another technology on the horizon that I am really excited about: sodium ion batteries. Sodium ion uses sodium instead of lithium. Why does that matter? Sodium is abundant. It's cheap. There are no supply chain constraints like there are with lithium. You're not dependent on a handful of countries for raw materials. Sodium ion batteries are heavier than lithium ion. That is a problem for cars, where weight matters. But for stationary storage, batteries sitting at a solar farm, weight doesn't matter. What matters is cost, lifespan, and safety, and sodium ion excels at all three. China's already deploying sodium ion at commercial scale. The technology works. It's proven. And as it scales up, costs keep falling. Here's what this means in practice. Solar plus storage is now cheaper than building a new natural gas plant in many markets. It's not just cleaner, it's cheaper. That means utilities and grid operators are choosing renewables not because of climate mandates or subsidies, but because the economics work. And that changes everything, because once the economics tip in favor of clean energy, the transition accelerates regardless of politics. You don't need climate activists convincing utilities to go green. You just need accountants doing math. Annual global battery storage installations are expected to hit over 100 gigawatts in 2026 for the first time. And that number is going to keep climbing. By 2030, we're talking 200 gigawatts per year. Battery storage is not a future technology, it's happening now. And it's solving the single biggest challenge renewable energy has faced: intermittency. So, talking about renewables, let's talk about offshore wind, because this is where you can see the tension between technology momentum and a political resistance playing out in real time. Globally, offshore wind hit 83.2 gigawatts of installed capacity in 2024. It's projected to grow at 21% annually through 2034. That is massive growth. Asia Pacific is leading the charge. The Philippines just launched an auction for 3.3 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity. Taiwan continues to lead with 20 projects awarded and 7 operational wind farms. South Korea enacted a dedicated offshore wind promotion act and is ramping up deployment. Europe has been the pioneer. Denmark, the UK, Germany building offshore wind for over a decade. They've worked through supply chain challenges, figured out installation logistics, brought costs down through competitive auctions. And then there's the US. Federally, the current administration is hostile to offshore wind. Permitting delays, regulatory uncertainty, rhetoric against renewable energy. If you only looked at Washington, you would think offshore wind in the US is dead. But it's not, because states are holding firm. Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, all of them have legally binding commitments to offshore wind. Contracts have been signed. Developers are moving forward because state law matters even when federal policy is hostile. Vineyard Wind, the first large-scale offshore wind farm in the U.S., is operational off the coast of Massachusetts. More projects are coming online. South Fork Wind is operational. Revolution Wind, Sunrise Wind, Empire Wind, all moving through development. Why does offshore wind matter so much? A few reasons. First, capacity factors. Offshore wind has higher capacity factors than onshore wind because wind is more consistent over water. That means more reliable generation. Second, resource potential. The east coast of the United States has massive offshore wind potential, and that is exactly where most Americans live, in coastal population centers. You can generate power close to where it's needed, reducing transmission challenges. Third, pairing with storage. Offshore wind plus battery storage creates a reliable, dispatchable clean energy system. You're not just replacing fossil fuels during windy times, you're creating a system that can provide power whenever the grid needs it. Now, there are real challenges. Supply chain constraints push global offshore wind costs up 12% in 2025. Not enough installation vessels, not enough specialized ships, not enough turbine manufacturing capacity. Europe faced these challenges a decade ago and worked through them. The US delayed starting, so now we're playing catch up. But the projects are moving. The supply chain is building out. The long-term trajectory is clear. What gives me hope here is state leadership. When the federal government won't lead, states step up. Regional compacts, shared procurement, coordinated planning between Massachusetts, New York, and others to build the supply chain together. This is how progress happens in a fragmented political environment. You don't wait for Washington, you build coalitions at the state and regional level. You move forward with the tools you have. Offshore wind is not a hypothetical. It's being built right now, despite federal hostility. because state commitments are real and the economics increasingly work. So let me zoom out for a moment because there is a pattern here that we need to talk about. Solar panels. The United States pioneered the technology. Bell Labs invented the silicon solar cell. But today, China dominates global solar manufacturing. Over 80% of the world's solar panels are actually made in China. Lithium-ion batteries. We pioneered the research, but China dominates production. When the world buys batteries for EVs or grid storage, they're overwhelmingly buying Chinese batteries. EVs. We invented the modern EV, but China's leading in sales, innovation, and affordability. Chinese EV companies are producing vehicles that cost half what American EVs cost, and the technology's good. Now, we're seeing the same pattern with green hydrogen and green steel. China has 25 green hydrogen projects under construction. Europe and the US, a handful of pilots and a lot of announcements that are not moving forward. So why does this keep happening? China treats clean energy as industrial strategy, as a national priority. Massive government support, coordinated policy, patient capital. Build the domestic market first, then export globally. The United States treats clean energy as a culture war issue. Red states versus blue states, fossil fuels versus renewables. We're politicizing what should be an economic and strategic decision. And the cost of falling behind isn't just market share, though that matters. It's industrial capacity, supply chain control, technology leadership, jobs, expertise, economic power. When the world buys Chinese solar panels, batteries, and EVs, that's economic activity we're seeding. Those are industries we could be leading. I didn't mean to make that rhyme, but here's the thing. This is not about technology. We have the innovation, we have the research institutions, we have the talent. What we lack is the political will to deploy at scale. We're choosing to lose these races. And yet, despite all that, the global clean energy transition keeps moving. Global clean tech investment hit $1.8 trillion in 2025, up 15% from the year before. Renewable energy deployment, 4.5 terawatts of new wind and solar expected globally from 2026 to 2030. Even in the US, despite policy headwinds, 336 gigawatts of wind, solar, and storage are expected through 2030. Why? Because the economics are too good to ignore. Renewable energy is now the cheapest source of new electricity in most of the world. Battery storage costs are plummeting. EVs are approaching price parity with gas cars in many markets. This transition is happening. The question is not whether. The question is who leads it. So one more thing before we close, I need to acknowledge something important. These technologies, batteries, wind turbines, solar panels, require materials, rare earth elements, lithium, cobalt, copper, and right now, extraction is often dirty, exploitative, and concentrated in a few countries, mostly China. This is a real challenge. Mining has environmental impacts. Labor practices in some cobalt mines are appalling. We have supply chain vulnerabilities and geopolitical dependencies. But it's solvable. Better recycling systems can recover over 90% of battery materials. Cleaner extraction methods exist. They just cost more. Building circular economies where materials get reused instead of landfilled. Developing domestic supply chains in the US and Europe. The key insight is this. The materials challenge is real, but it's not a reason to stop scaling these solutions. It's a reason to scale them smarter. The transition to clean energy needs to be a transition to a regenerative economy. We'll dive much deeper into this in a future episode. The mining question, what clean energy actually costs environmentally, and how circular economy principles solve this. For now, just know that yes, there are material constraints and impacts, and no, they're not insurmountable. and they are still vastly better than continuing fossil fuel extraction forever. So let me bring this home. Battery storage costs down 67% in 3 years. Offshore wind moving forward despite federal hostility. Global clean tech investments up 15%. Renewable energy becoming the cheapest source of new electricity in most of the world. The technologies work. The economics work. The momentum is real. What we lack isn't innovation. It's political will. We're choosing to cede industrial leadership in technology after technology. We're treating climate action as optional while competitors treat it as strategy. And we're falling behind. But here is what gives me hope. States are stepping up where the federal government will not. Technology costs keep falling regardless of politics. Global momentum is undeniable. And millions of people, engineers, entrepreneurs, policymakers, citizens, keep building the future anyway. The question isn't whether the clean energy transition happens. It's happening. The economics, they're just too compelling. The technology, too good. The question is whether we lead it or follow it. In the next episode, what actually works? Climate solutions at scale, lessons from countries getting it right, from Denmark's wind revolution to Norway's EVs, to what the United States could learn if we pay attention. Until then, keep your eyes on the technology scaling now. Don't let political noise distract from economic reality. And remember, innovation doesn't stop because politicians aren't paying attention. Thanks for listening. I'm Alex Banat, and this is The Climate Layer.